We are now live, Chair.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, so welcome everybody to this Cabinet Asset Management and Markets Working Party. And we'll start, if we can just run through the substitutes and apologies. I know we did this off camera, but if we can do it again on camera, please.
Yes, Chair, we've got Councillor Kimber is substituting for Councillor Swift, Megan Swift, and Councillor Hay is substituting for Councillor Wood. And we have apologies from Councillor Megan Swift and Councillor Wood.
Lovely, thank you. Oh, and welcome, Joe. Pleased you were able to make it. Right, so next I just want to remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests they might have in relation to items included on this agenda. You either do it now, or if you suddenly realise when we get to the item, you can do it then. And it's not recommended that the public be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of any of the items of business on this agenda. Then if we can just go to the minutes of the meeting on the 11th of September, pages 3 to 6. Does anybody have any comments on these, and can we agree them as a true record? So I'm not seeing any comments, so I think if we can then mark those as agreed and to be signed by the chair. And we then move on to item 5, which is the revenue budget monitoring. Paul, I assume you're going to be dealing with this, and members will have received this separately, so I hope everybody did get it and has had a look at it. Okay, so can I hand over to you, Paul? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report for the CAFM and Market Service details of the results of the third and final revenue monitor that will be included in the Council's overall revenue monitor that will be reported to Cabinet in February 2024. The appendices in the report detail the forecast budget pressures of 187k for the CAFM service and 228k for the markets. I think, Chair, I've said in probably the last few reports, including I think the outturn that we reported back in May, that the forecasts for both services have changed very little over the last sort of 12 months, particularly markets. I think we're well versed with the issues in relation to markets. Although there's still 4 months of the financial year to go in terms of the monitoring period, because the forecasts were completed in November, we don't anticipate, Chair, that there'll be any significant change between now and the end of the year. So the 187k and the 228k, I think when we report in the outturn, possibly in May 24, we think we'll broadly be at that position. I think members familiar with the services and the working party will be aware of the relevant services. I think if I'll just take markets first, Chair, we are aware that the market service is required to achieve a high level of income, particularly around the indoor markets for both the Borough Market and Tombadin. I think if you look at the appendices 2 and 3 in the report, 75% of the overall market or income required for the market service has to be generated by those areas. You see we've put a table in Appendix 3 that details the occupancy levels around the indoor markets, and Borough Market we're at 76% and Tombadin Market 82%. So the challenge has always remained, I think, for the market services to recruit and retain the tenants for the indoor markets in particular. It is a challenge in that even if we are successful and we are able to encourage more tenants to come to both areas, that with the incentive scheme that we've got in place in the markets, it's quite a while, Chair, before the full level of income sort of feeds through to the market service. I think in relation to CAFM, the issue is slightly different. And I'll say again, Chair, that the CAFM budget is different from any other budget in the council, in that CAFM are responsible for both service and building control budgets. 300 odd buildings in the corporate estate is a challenge to manage that in anyone's books. And there's a significant budget. I think it's in the region of 6 to 7 million that's there to pay for the costs in relation to the building. The report details the major changes forecast in the current report for CAFM. From a service point of view, the council is expecting to deliver a saving within facilities and management support as the council tries to retain the relevant staff we need to clean the buildings. It also details in the report, Chair, that there'll be a one-off saving in the current year of about £325,000 around prudential borrowing, which will not be required this year due to slippage in capital schemes that the service managers. The report also details the areas within the building control budget where the service is trying to retain costs within budget, and that's around repairs and maintenance and rates in particular, two areas, Chair, that in the current year are going to cause budget pressures. So overall, two significant areas of the council's budget, and in the current year, we are expecting the budget pressures of 187 and 228. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Does anyone have any questions? No? Yes, Joe. Councillor Thompson and then Councillor Hay.
Sorry, I was looking for my raise hand button. Paul, I think this has came up before. Thank you very much as well for the report. I think it's came up before in relation to particularly Halifax Borough Market with regards to the income assumption being so close to 100% occupancy. I know it's not something for now, but given kind of the nature of markets and even a highly performing market, you're looking at somewhere like Barnsley, which is 92% occupancy. Yeah. Could we look at the income assumption being based on a lower occupancy rate, just so we're not left with, because it seems to be a recurring thing that we've got a big gap with Halifax Borough Market based on occupancy, but the target feels unrealistic given the nature of markets, if that makes sense.
It does make perfect sense, Councillor. I think we showed the table, I think it's Appendix 3 in the report for the first time, just to give the working group an idea of the high level of occupancy that's needed to achieve anywhere near the budgets. And I think on the borough market, it shows that a maximum occupancy would only achieve 1.1 million, which is 100,000 over the budget set at this time. I think from an officer point of view, I've got to say that we can look at these budgets and look to adjust budgets, but it's really a decision for the council overall, because obviously there's budget pressures within directorates, other directorates within the council. And I think if the council wants to look at any adjustments we make within the markets budget, it's got to be consideration as part of the budget process. If that sounds evasive, it's not meant to be, but you know, we've got a council budget that we need to manage overall, and you know, we might want to deliver a reduced markets budget in terms of reducing the income budgets, but I think we've got to have consideration for other budgets as well, and ultimately it's a decision for members when they set the budget for next year.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks, Paul. So I'm just covering on this committee. So just for my clarity, you've got, I think the performance, I'm looking at Appendix 2, I think the performance so far this year in terms of income less expenditure is 421,000. What was that figure this time previous year?
Yeah, you're talking about the annual budget there, and the figure was broadly the same. The budgets are increased for inflation each year. That is the net budget for the market service. So if we looked at it in gross terms, it may be that there's an expenditure budget of 600,000, an income budget of 1 million, and therefore the net budget would be for the 421 that's detailed in the report. So that it's clear to understand that is the net budget. If you go across the line in Appendix 2, you'll see the 421 is made up of an expenditure annual budget of 589 and the annual budget of the income target of 1011. So we've made the point before that in service control terms, the service generates more income than it actually spends each year. And this point we've made before, that actually the market service still contributes towards other areas within the council. So the 421 is the net budget. my recollection is that budget will be broadly in line with what it was in previous years.
Yes, yeah, and you're right, Paul. I've sort of messed up here because you're right. That's the budget, isn't it? And then there's a forecast which is 193,000.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, so the actual outturn for last year, was that nearer the 400 or nearer the 200?
I think it was nearer the 200. The 200 is the actual budget pressure that we're reporting this time, and I think from memory it was round about 228, 240 last year. And I think, we've reported in the past that the position with markets, all things being equal, we don't think it'll change that much. And we think this position is likely to continue until there's some sort of significant action, really.
Yeah, no, understand. I mean, I might be being a bit cheeky speaking for all members, but I suppose in terms of next year's budget, we want something that's challenging but believable. So, I think it's really important for this and all other budgets that, something realistic is in there so we can plan accordingly. Okay, thank you.
I accept that totally, yeah.
Yep.
Councillor Bradburgh?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the reports, Paul. It's always interesting reading. Clearly challenging as well. So I declare an interest as the chair of the Town Deal Board, because the question is in relation to what impact do you think we'll have next year when we demolish the existing market and we have the temporary markets in place? Because clearly there will be some disruption, I would have thought, and the budget pressures on that as well. So that's mainly my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll just invite people to sort of, whether John wants to come in on that or Alan in a minute. But I think, again, just to reflect that we've mentioned this before, it's great. There's a lot of work going on in and around town centres and throughout the borough. The Future High Street funding, providing all the £5 million that we're doing in the borough market. But I think Alan's referred to in the past, there'll always be a period of disruption that you've alluded to in Brighouse, and we haven't got a crystal ball to see what that means, but it may impact on things in the meantime. And I think it's something obviously we're aware of. It's great that the work's going to deliver something that improves our areas, but I think we all share some concern about what the impact might be in the future in and around Brighouse and Halifax and indeed other areas. I don't know if somebody else wants to just sort of come in on that one. Sorry, Alan. Yeah.
Alan?
Thanks, Chair. I think the point that Councillor Blackburn makes is a good one. We are going through a period of change and a period of disruption across a number of our markets. So in actual fact, while Paul said there's been minimal change in the forecast outturn, in some ways that's quite a positive picture, because we know that the extent of the works that are taking place, for example, at the Halifax Borough Market, the disruption that's causing. With Brighouse specifically, we have plans in place, as you know, Councillor Blackburn, for a temporary market to at least accommodate the existing traders. So we have that continuity of provision. But hopefully the other thing that will happen while we're going through that change is, as we promote the new market and the work starts to take place, and hopefully that will raise some excitement, then we hope to generate more interest. And with the temporary market, we're hoping that we can kind of build on what we've got there at the moment, so we're ready for the new provision as and when it arrives. So this next period is quite a critical period to minimise the impact on the existing traders, but at the same time to promote the future opportunities and try and grow the market, which was always the intention of the investment in the first place.
Okay, thank you. So if I could just come in then, if no more hands up. So in terms of the market's income target, yes, it's been rehearsed at these meetings before, and we know that it does need amending. If it was easy to do, we'd have done it, and the difficulty always being that if we amend the target to a more realistic one, that money has to come out of the budget somewhere else, and because there is no slack in the budget, it's always a case of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and so it just becomes where are we going to take it from instead, and that's why we always end up in that position. But yes, as the council continues to go through its transformation, and that is exactly the sort of anomaly that will have to be removed. Welcome, Becky. Just seeing you are here. In relation to, and I suppose the other point that Alan, I think Paul made is that actually the worst thing about this in some ways is the way it makes it look as if the markets aren't doing well, whereas in fact, relatively speaking, compared to many other councils, they are doing extremely well. And we should be very proud of them. I've been going to ask you about the prudential borrowing, so thank you for giving the explanation of why that was down. But just in terms of the budget overspends, really, if you can just, without going into detail, just reassure people that clearly they can't stay like that. You say they'd be like that at the end of the year, but in reality, we will have to find ways in which to bring those shortfalls down, because we can't, whatever that is, because we can't have that at the end of the year. It's got to be balanced somehow.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. You're quite right, Chair, in what you've said, and there's a number of things that could impact on the budget or the outturn in both a positive and negative manner. Clearly, the weather and the consumption of energy in the final quarter of the year is something that's more evident than in the other quarters. But although we've taken account of that, equally, there's a significant programme of repairs. I think the appendix shows the budget of 2 million. The extent to which we can deliver that programme of work in the final quarter of the year, with weather and anything else that may arise, spend can change quite significantly in a number of areas. I think the most important point, clearly, Chair, is what you've just mentioned, is that we have a duty to achieve a balanced budget, and colleagues will be working to try and deliver that. It's important that moving forward we reduce costs in an area or maximise income to the full extent, given that the financial situation that the council's in. So we will be working throughout the remainder of the year, Chair, and looking at all those costs to see what it is that we can do, what is it that we have to do, and making decisions to reduce the net cost.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Chair. I was just thinking it was very kind of Paul to respond to your question, because it's me who's accountable as the manager of the service, and it is something that we do take very, very seriously, as is indicated in the monitor. The service in my time has delivered £5 million worth of revenue savings gross, 4 million net, to deal with some of the additional costs. So we do have a track record of delivery. We do tend to deliver a balanced budget. As I set out in the report, there are a number of pressures that have come together that made it particularly challenging this year, but we don't leave any stone unturned. And I think you've heard me say before, we've delivered on a range of different levels, from the basic housekeeping of checking our energy bills, making sure that we're not overspending in areas, and if there are if there are issues that need to be dealt with, we kind of respond to those very quickly, to the more innovative work that we've done around our energy reduction schemes and disposal of buildings to reduce our costs. So, as I say, it's been a range of measures over a number of years, but we continue to actively seek opportunities to reduce our spend. It's just this year is particularly challenging because a number of things have come together, but that doesn't stop us from doing all that we can. Because you're right, I have an accountability to deliver a balanced budget, and I take that very seriously and always have done. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And just to say, John Markets isn't here, is he? Oh, yes, you are. Just to say that I've been into Halifax Market each time when I come into Halifax for meetings, and despite the difficulties that they're labouring under with the scaffolding and so on, all the stallholders that I've been interacting with have been very cheery and Christmassy, which has made it a very pleasant experience. So just congratulations to them, really, and to you for working with them to help ease any difficulties that are arising. Okay, so in relation to that, I think all we need to do is note that report and the steps being taken. And actually, I've been confusing everybody because I said that had been circulated separately, whereas in fact it was item 6 that had been circulated separately. So if we can now turn to item 6, and who's presenting that?
I am Chair, Elaine.
Jane, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The report's an update of the current position with the capital programme in relation to CAF and Work, and the Working Party act as stewards of the programme, so that's why the report is brought here. The main change, I think we do biannual reports, the main change from the previous report with regard to the allocation of current capital relates to the reallocation of the funds that were allocated to Queen's Road Neighbourhood Centre. Those have been reallocated to the crematorium flat roof, which is leaking at the moment. Also to Todmorden Library roof, which is part of the rack issue. It's hopefully the only building, well, it is the only building at the moment that we've got problems with. And also a sum of money allocated to the safety curtain in the Victoria Theatre, because that has an asbestos bumper at the bottom and also asbestos frontage. So I'm just trying to do some work just to make sure that we can make that as safely as possible, either taking off the asbestos or doing something that makes it a little safer. Otherwise, we've got to do annual asbestos checks just to make sure there's nothing in the air, etc. There's a appendix indicates what we're spending the money on. We have 2 budgets now, one that's nearly finished, and hopefully we'll have spent that money subject to being able to get access by the end of March. And the other is one that was allocated in 2022. Again, that identifies what the money is currently being spent on. The next part of the report goes on to our decarbonisation programme. Decarb 1 is complete. 3A, which relates to Todmorden Sports, is hopefully complete or is going to be completed shortly. If anybody knows that site, unfortunately, we were interrupted by the gas service who came into the road when we both wanted to be there. So that's been a little delayed, but that is due to finish in first quarter next year. We also submitted a successful bid to Net Zero Regional Accelerator funding so that we could do some feasibility funding to enable us to submit an application to phase 3C of the decarbonisation funding. Which we managed to submit despite a little hiccup with the process. We managed to submit on the second round. We did submit on the first round, but that was cancelled. And we were within the first 15 minutes, thanks to a gentleman who was very calm called Mark Jennings, who managed to be able to upload everything within a very short time scale. We're in 2 minds. We haven't heard anything. We're not sure if that's good or bad news as to whether, because it's dealt with on a first come, first served basis. Normally, if it goes through the admin, then they would contact you and you get put back. So at the moment, we're just waiting to see where we stand with that. And we should know, hopefully January, February, whether or not we've been successful on that bid. A report did go to Cabinet, I think it was last week, asking for match funding, and that was supported. So assuming that we do get we are successful with the bid, then the match funding will come through. And again, that's for 3 buildings: Victoria Theatre, Borough Market and Beechwood Library. Again, building on what we're already doing in Victoria Theatre and Borough Market through other funding. Next one, sorry, there's quite a lot of reports. I suddenly realise how much there is in once you start writing things down. Ainley's Depot, if anybody's been past there, you'll see now that there's actually something coming out of the ground, so you can see that there is progress being made on there. We're trying to deliver that within the original budget, which was, I think, allocated probably 2-3 years ago, and we all know what's happened with regard to inflation and other things and building costs since then. But we are just looking at the budget just to make sure where we are with regard to funding on that, but hopefully that should be fine. Centre at 3 Ways, the asbestos, I think, is all removed. We've procured the demolition, and that is due to start in January next year. It's quite a long project. It's a 20-week project, so it's going to take a little time before the site is cleared. But again, that is within budget at the moment, so there's no issues with that one. Probably the biggest issue for me is a forward programme, which I come on to later on in the report, is to try and identify funding for future works, because obviously the buildings don't stand still. It rains, it's windy, as you probably, we get lots of calls on days like these about things that are happening. And I'm currently working on trying to pull together an idea of future requirements. I'm obviously aware of the pressures on budgets that is going to be an issue for all of us. So I'm trying to do the best I can within that. Previously, when we made the bid, as the report mentioned, it was mainly health and safety works. So I'm trying to split them into similar categories to give members at least an opportunity to see where the health and safety issues are, what's operational. So they've got a guidance on if the limited funding, where they would like to spend the money, and that will come forward together with other capital bids in due course. I have highlighted in the report a number of buildings which probably deserve more of a programme approach, which is something that we've done, if anybody's aware of Todmorden Town Hall, where we looked at the whole building, did a scheme, and that was successful in getting Todmorden Town Deal money. And it's what they call shovel-ready and pipeline-ready schemes. And with the difficulty in obtaining capital, I think that's probably where we need to start looking at for some of our buildings. We're doing something similar with the Town Hall, Halifax Town Hall, and place, Victoria Theatre, Bankfield Museum, the Borough Market. Or, we're spending a lot of money, but there's still quite a large amount to be spent to bring them up to the standard that I'm sure we'd all like to see. So that's work that's currently being done. In the report, I've given an idea of our buildings that are benefiting from some external funding, which I think have already been mentioned through future high streets and other things. So we are benefiting from that. Grant applications, we do try and get some grant applications in. We were successful in the revenue for the sports funding that came available, and we have put a capital bid in as well. Again, that's going to be prioritised based on a criteria. And again, we're hoping to hear from that fairly shortly. I think that's about £600,000 that we put in for that. And that's mainly to do with the controls and things within the sports centres. I've outlined there again, asset management wise, Siobhan's team are going to be looking at depot strategies, and some of the work buildings, we're relying on other service-led reviews to determine whether or not what's required from a building point of view. But again, they would be looked at as individual projects and brought forward on that basis. If anybody's got any questions, I think I've quickly summarised where we are. If you just let me know and I'll try and answer them for you.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Yes, thank you very much for that very full report. So does anyone have any questions for Elaine? Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elaine. Quite a lot in there and quite a lot of detail, so probably worth some more reading and rereading to kind of get my head around it. I just wanted to ask about, you've kind of briefly mentioned it, the grant applications in 6.4. Realistically, do we expect we'll have heard back on those in the near future, or is that kind of a longer term?
Well, if certainly the PSD 3C say let's keep to their timetable, we should know by February for that one. And I think, again, the swimming pool discount scheme, that should be in the new year. These are all government-led, so I imagine, they're wanting budgets, timetables as well. They will be under a similar pressure. I'm not 100% certain with the mine funding, because that's really led by library service, but that's been in for a while. Again, that's government-led in the background somewhere. So again, we're hoping to hear from that in the new year as well. Whether or not we're successful is a different matter. I think I've said in the report there was a huge oversubscription for the PSDS funding, but we have been successful in the past. And I must say that the team are very experienced. We're very lucky with the technical team we've got, and they've been successful previously. So we are hopeful that we will get the funding.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any other hands. Just a few things I want to comment on, really. One is I don't know, I just find it quite absurd that the Salix applications are first come, first served, and it's as if you're applying to go to a pop concert or something. That just seems a terrible way to distribute funding. And so I just, I do hope we're successful. In terms of Todmorden, well, obviously that's my ward. I will be delighted when you can dig the road up again, although unfortunately I know that there's some of my residents who will not be delighted. But I think it's going to be well worth it, just for a bit of short-term pain on that road. And yes, you mentioned grant funding for external buildings, and again for Todmorden, the bandstand got its Heritage Lottery grant very recently, so that was really pleasing that the the people managing that bid for the town, or the gentleman and the town working for Todmorden Town Council, has done really well to pull all that together. But again, an enormous amount of work to get that money. I just wanted to emphasise the point that you made about the fact that CAFM can't just decide they don't want a building, because it's going to be used in all likelihood by another service, and therefore you're dependent upon that service for whether or not they want to carry on doing whatever they're doing there, which makes it quite complicated and leaves you with the responsibility for something and the financial responsibility for it when you're not necessarily using it yourselves. So it is a complication for you. So if there are no further comments or questions.
Could I just say, Salix have said that they will try and come up with a different scheme other than first come, first served. And there's been an announcement that more money is going to become available. So I'm hoping that they'll perhaps find a better way to deal with it. Although because we've had money in the past, that might not be the best thing for us, because we've benefited. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting to know.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, if we can note that report, please. And then move on to item 7, Asset Review Programme 23 to 24 Quarter 3 update. And this is going to be Alan, Steve?
It's going to be me, Siobhan, if that's okay, everybody.
Sorry, Siobhan.
It's fine. So I'm just going to provide an update since the last paper that we presented back in July. So for the Asset Review Programme for Phase 1, just a couple of things to note. Mainly that we have a capital receipt now from the sale of Glenhome, and Ellen Southgate is currently under offer. Moving on to the workplace office accommodation strategy with Halifax Town Hall. The mechanical and engineering surveys are currently underway. We anticipate that we'll have the results of those in January. And then on Muckja House, we are just defining some required works at the moment. The next part is the depot review process, which Elaine alluded to there. The review is the latest phase in the transformation of our council depots, of our accommodation, having a focus on buildings driven by service requirements. The aims of that review are to utilise the depots to their full potential and taking a holistic approach to them, working with the services to make sure the provision is matched to demand and in the appropriate geographical locations. The focus on the well-being of our colleagues, partnership organisations and volunteers, and then just considering the storage and the space requirements that we've got that are outstanding at the moment for all directorates. So again, tying in that holistic approach to that. Just like to point out at this stage as well, again, as Elaine alluded to, that there are other programmes of work that are happening that do feed into this depots review. So there's the EV, the electric vehicles, and also the arrangements with the waste. And because they're unknown entities at the moment, because those scopes haven't yet been completely defined, they will have a major impact on Battinson Road. So that's why that would need to sit outside of the depot review at this moment in time. The next steps on that are just basically working with services to try and define timeline and to define where we need to progress. Anyone got any questions on that?
Thank you, Elaine. Any questions, anyone? Danielle.
Sorry if I should know this. How many depots do we have currently?
In answer to your question, I'm afraid I'm just not exactly sure at this moment in time. I can come back to you on that though.
Okay, no worries.
9, is it, Steve?
Yeah, we've got more than that at the moment.
All right, those are the ones that are listed in the
yeah,
scheme.
we have. So they're
sorry,
the ones that we've initially identified.
Yeah, Steve probably knows the answer.
It will depend what we define as a depot, because we have many buildings that are used for kind of partial storage or depots, but we probably have somewhere in the region of sort of 20 odd or so of that ilk. But in terms of specific depots, then we probably only have sort of 10 or 12, something of that region.
You've actually just answered the second part of my question, Stevens, around how we define depots and use of space. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Joe?
Yeah, I'm just reading a bit on the workplace office accommodation strategy. Obviously, this year's the 4th year, but of the 7-year program. Obviously, during that program, we were presented with COVID-19, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the impact that's kind of had, and basically the impact that's had, and whether actually the timing of the scheme worked out quite well in that regard.
I mean, I suppose there was the impact of COVID, and then there was the subsequent impact of a change in technology with the introduction of Microsoft Teams that helped enable people to be able to work from home. So when as part of the OAS, we changed to the 1-to-5 desk ratio with the anticipation that on the whole people would work from home 4 days a week and be in the office 1 day. That was also supported by the ability to be able to work with the technology that ran alongside that. But yes, there was obviously the impact from COVID-19 because people were asked to go and work from home, and so therefore our buildings became vacant. It enabled other works to be able to be done, and it also threw people into a culture change, sort of the acceptance around the change of working to these ratios as a result of the reduction in the buildings.
Okay, thank you. I think the fact that this is a 7-year project, we're in year 4, there've been all those changes, yet you're saying that schemes are still within the planned budgets is no small achievement to have succeeded in that, really. You would have expected that they could easily have run away with construction and all cost inflation and all inflation. So well done on that. So I'm not seeing any other hands. So again, if we can just note that report and move on to item 8. Sorry, which is the update on the procurement of the new directorate framework for consultancy services. And I'm guessing this is going to be Lucy, because I don't know what else you're here. But yeah, okay.
It is. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide an update. I tried to give a little bit of background within the meeting as to how the initial framework was procured back in 2019. The director at the time wanted to get consultancy service spend a bit more under control, and so I was asked to implement a framework for consultancy services. That's now coming to its end, and it has taken a year to re-procure. And we have adapted the framework. We have made some changes given consultation with services and service needs. So we've adapted it a little bit. We've made the terms easier. We've strengthened the contract terms, etc., and how the services are provided. So I'm now in a position where we've awarded the new framework, and within the report you will see the 11 lots and the 4 suppliers that have been awarded. Now, we did quite a lot of work throughout this process to try and encourage SME companies and suppliers onto this framework. We held a bidders day in April. It was full. We were in the town hall. It was an open invitation. It was full. We had 55 suppliers. We had Go for Growth in attendance, because sometimes applying for larger council contracts is a bit of a barrier. So we provided the support via Go for Growth, who are our partners, had brilliant feedback from that session, which accumulated in a total of 142 tenders for this new framework. So as you can comprehend, it was a massive, massive piece of procurement work. 142 very detailed letters had to be provided to each of those suppliers who submitted a return. And I'm really pleased to know how high the percentage of suppliers awarded onto the framework are actually classed as SMEs. 55% of the suppliers are classed as SME suppliers. I think this is really, really positive for the council and really good for social value. Social value was integrated into the tender. They were marked on what they're currently doing and what they can do under the terms of the framework at a call off level. So this framework will now be in place for 4 years. From January 2024, Legal had a mammoth task of issuing 88 contracts out to all of the suppliers. So we have to just wait for all of those to come in. And I've also included within the report a pipeline of imminent services. I have people waiting, really wanting to get on and award work under the new framework. So they're all in the pipeline, and I'm holding a mobilisation meeting on the 4th of January to kickstart everything with the suppliers. So I think that's everything that I've covered within the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. That sounds really good. I did have a question about maybe linked to your work on the SME side, which is, to what extent do we encourage local businesses inside Calderdale to tender, and how successful that's been?
Yeah, so under the framework, on the previous and on the new framework, we don't have any suppliers currently awarded within Calderdale, but there isn't a massive consultancy base within Calderdale, but we've got 25% within the West Yorkshire boundary and the others at national level. Now, that's where the registered head office is. Now, one of the questions actually within the tender, because we couldn't restrict it to those with a Calderdale postcode, for example. So what we tried to do is we tried to integrate it within the resources question, within the tender return, and those that said that they have a local office based in Brighouse, Leeds, Huddersfield, they would have been awarded higher marks. So they would have got higher marks for that question. So that would have done better for them. And also what we tried to do, working cleverly with procurement and legal, is smaller companies, local suppliers as well, can often have lower hourly rates because they've got lower overheads. So we actually changed the weighting on those smaller lots to try and encourage them to really be competitive with the larger companies. So we were trying to do as much as we can to help them in with the bidders day, with the support. Now I have to say, I've also got 2 hats on. I have a framework hat, and I also manage the CAFM contracts. Within the CAFM maintenance contracts, 30% are awarded within Calderdale. And I can manage that, and I can achieve that by looking at the response time. So because we need an urgent response on urgent maintenance matters, that means people within the Calderdale boundary are better set up to respond to that leak, to respond to any urgent issue. So over 30% of our maintenance contracts are within the Calderdale boundary, and they are our largest spends as well. So where we can, we try and integrate it as much as we can do, and try and support new companies to get on, for the opportunities when they arise.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I mean, it sounds like you're doing everything you can. I mean, obviously, because I've got an interest on the climate change side, because I'm on the climate partnership, and I would say we don't want people travelling up and down the country to provide consultancy. So I don't know whether you can start incorporating that into some of your metrics as well.
Yeah, they've all the ones that are awarded have a base here, have a base within the area. It's just the registered office might be a bit further afield, unfortunately.
I see. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Joe, then Howard, then Danielle.
Yeah, I highly recommend, if anyone wants a really thrilling evening, that they read the Local Government Association's Guide to Procurement. It's 40 pages of sheer joy that I recommend anyone read. I was just going to ask, and I thought Marty might have come onto it, and he's kind of touched on it anyway. As part of procurement, do we have any question or any requirements around kind of climate reduction targets and that type of thing in terms of who we procure from, in line with our own priorities in Calderdale?
Yeah, we do align it. We've aligned it within the framework, and we've aligned it within the maintenance contracts. It's one of the questions we always ask is what are they doing for climate reduction? Are they getting electric fleet vehicles? Where's the local supply base? Those are the sorts of questions we ask. So where they give details of that local supply and their intentions with the fleet vehicles. They're obviously awarded higher points, and we also ask what they're currently delivering at the moment as well. So it is something that we integrate in within our tenders. Should we go to Councillor?
Because sorry, I keep saying Howard, and of course you're not responding because I'm muted. Sorry.
My apologies as well. Lucy, an excellent report. It's really positive that we're engaging with so many SMEs, and I think that's a really positive step forward. And I just really want to ensure that we continue to engage with those, even though that this stage is being completed and awarded. But actually, I think it's really important. I think we hold additional events to actually keep these small enterprises on board and keep them engaged, because there's always somebody that will show new talent. And I think it's really positive that they've achieved so many positive outcomes, really.
Yeah, no, I agree. And this is the bidders' day for the framework was highly successful. It actually took my breath away to see so many suppliers within that town hall. It was full and they're fully engaged. So it does work really well. And there's no reason why we can't hold more future events as well, as and when the opportunity arises.
Thank you. Danielle?
Actually, all my points have been covered, Chair, but I will just say, in the same way that everybody else has, I think it's great to see such an investment in this piece of work, and that, building on that in the future and building strength within our smaller businesses is just great. So thank you to everybody that was involved in that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. And I'd echo all of that. And I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? So when I was at the town board the other day, the Todmorden Town Board, there was a company who don't have to be on this framework, but who'd been commissioned by the town board, who, whilst they had at least one office in West Yorkshire, the two people who were working for them lived in Hebden Bridge and Todmorden. So it's very... You often need to look below the surface, so it might appear, like you say, that the head office might not be local, but actually they may well have the local staff. And I think because people can work remotely nowadays, it becomes quite a complicated setup at many of these consultancy firms, because people are effectively based at home most of the time, aren't they? So, and I think that was one of the things that had made them a good a good company in that particular instance, because they could offer staff who, if you were careful about how you phrased your requirements, would make them a good fit for what you wanted without actually breaking any procurement rules, which you've obviously got to be really careful about doing. So yes, thank you very much for all the effort you've put in. Really been worthwhile, I think, for us all in the council. Okay. So again, if we can note the excellent work done there. And just this was a question I asked Alan at a different meeting. In effect, I mean, you were asked about keeping everybody on board and maybe having catch-ups with them all, but it's also the case, I think, that you have to share work out fairly between them. Once they're on the framework, they would have grounds for complaint if they found that 2 years down the line they'd never been used, but some other companies had been used 5 times.
Yeah. So we've tightened up those terms. We made it very fair. We issue public information notices. We're very open with the work awarded, so all the suppliers are aware of what has happened under their individual lot. They go out quarterly. The feedback from the previous framework was that we always kept them we always maintained communication. We always had the regular supplier reviews. We've struck up some very strong partnerships in this area now. So yeah, we will continue to do so.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So that report noted, that brings us on to the Calderdale Metropolitan Borough Council Land and Property Asset Management Strategy 2018 to 24. And Alan, where have you gone? Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. As you can see, the Q2 monitor remains very positive. We've already discussed some of the areas of activity, and others are on the future work programme. So this is kind of a summary of a range of activity. 9 of the 10 actions are currently rated green, on track. 1 activity is currently rated as amber, which is a minor concern. It's taken 3 attempts to recruit to a new role to support our increased use of data and intelligence to drive improvement. But the good news is we found a fantastic candidate who's accepted our offer and is just working through the pre-employment checks. So, as they say, if at first you don't succeed, there remains sufficient time for us to deliver on the activity, so hence it's just a minor concern. We just need confirmation that the candidate has started with us, and then we'll develop the work programme and take that work forward. Other than that, I'd be happy to take any questions, Chair.
Does anybody have? Yes, Martin?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Yeah, just on, I'm looking at 3.6b and 3.6c, which are around reducing energy consumption and energy performance certificates, and they've got a deadline of 2030. And I know that's sort of the final deadline, but I didn't know whether it'd be helpful just to have some shorter target dates. We should probably work into anyway, but just for the committee to see in future, so we know that we're on track in terms of initial steps.
Yeah, through you, Chair. You're quite right, Councillor Hay. What this provides is the kind of the overview of the strategy, which is a kind of medium to long term strategy. Sitting behind many of the activities is a kind of more detailed action plan. So, as I said, there are more specific reports are brought to the working party around those areas of activities. So when we update on decarbonisation, for example, we'll talk about the range of measures that are taking place over with kind of shorter milestones that each contribute towards the overall target, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can pick up the detail in future reports.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any further hands, and it's lovely to see a green and amber, and mostly green, rating for everything. That's really reassuring in challenging circumstances. Okay, so again, if we can note that report, and thanks to all the hard work done there. And that brings us on to the final item, number 10, the work programme. The provisional work programme set out. I don't know whether there's any proposed changes to that or whether there's anything that anybody wants to add to it. No, not seeing anything. Okay, that's fine. Well, we'll leave it as that, and obviously if anything does crop up, it can be put in nearer the time. Okay, that brings us to the end of the agenda, and nothing left to say except to wish everybody, those who are going to get one anyway, a very good break, and hope everybody comes back refreshed in the new year, and we'll see you in March at the next corporate assets and markets meeting working group. Okay, thank you all very much, and thank you to all the officers.
Thank you, Chair. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Merry
Chair.
Christmas, everyone.